All right, so what brought you to post about your fall on the neighborhood Facebook group?
Well, it was kind of a strategic decision to make something good out of something that was bad, to raise awareness, and because I've become the spearheading person for aging in this neighborhood. There's a lot of work going on about seniors and getting older, but it's not neighborhood specific. And I think it's the relationships and the trust we can get with people we know and who are our peers in our own neighborhood that can sometimes influence us more than an anonymous tip or an anonymous article, or even a famous person writing, but we don't identify with them because we've never talked to them personally.
Yeah, you always want to go with someone you know, like, and trust personally,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And I think people think I'm pretty healthy and pretty with it. And so if it can happen to her, it can happen to me.
Right. And eventually, I mean, falls are one of the most common things. So you hear all the time people end up older age. Typically, it's more 80s and 90s. They fall, end up in a hospital with a broken hip. And unfortunately, because we haven't prepped for that, it's oftentimes a downward spiral. Like, we want to prevent
one
that.
bad fall
Yeah.
can change your life.
Absolutely.
One bad fall can totally change the dynamics of your last years. So yeah. Unfortunately, do you have good bones?
Right. That's another thing. And that's something that hopefully, like, we can catch on the younger end, because it does get harder to maintain bone density as you age, but it's not impossible. And the more impact work, and that doesn't have to be like necessarily jumping up and down, but walking, lifting somewhat heavy weights, punching things, anything that's gonna cause a little bit of impact, that sends the signal to the bone to, hey, it may not be like growing like it is when you're younger, but at least, hey, I need to stay here and not disintegrate and go away because I'm being used for something.
I love how articulate you are, and I'm not always. And you know, we can really make this something that's familiar to our locality.
Yeah,
I think it could be really fun.
Good.
So this got started because you saw that and offered to videotape a few exercises.
Exactly.
So tell me what you've been thinking that you want to start out with.
Yeah, so some of the big things people don't think about in regards to fall prevention is oftentimes they just think I need to be stronger. So they might get in the gym or even at home with some dumbbells and do some squats and whatnot. But one of the biggest things is like the vestibular and proprioceptive systems. So how do we train those?
Tell us what those two are.
So the inner ear, and then your visual perception and how your body is in relation to your environment. Are two big things that have to do with balance, because if you don't perceive your environment to be where it actually is, for example, thinking there is another step down and then there really isn't, you kind of get that little jolt, and then you potentially trip and fall. Or like you said, you were reaching up in the closet to get something, and then maybe things felt a little dizzy, or you were just all of a sudden off balance, and that's when your like vestibular system isn't necessarily in concert with what is actually in reality, and so that throws you off balance also, and you end up falling even if you didn't trip over anything. So that's two big things: proprioceptive field and then your vestibular system. And then another big thing is muscular power. So like I said, people often train for strength, and they think I need maybe to lift a little bit more weight and get my legs stronger, but when you think about tripping and falling, it's really a matter of actually getting your foot out in front of you fast enough to catch yourself. And if you don't, that's when you tumble to the ground. So while it's very important to learn exercise such as maybe squats or lunges, and learn them slow and controlled so that you are safe through the full range of motion, once you've achieved that, you actually want to train them faster. Even walking pace, you want to train walking pace faster so that your muscle adapts to be able to react at a fast pace and can get out in front of you. And then when it's out in front of you, that's when you need strength, because that's when your body then lowers down and absorbs you. But you've got to have it fast first to be able to catch the load, your body. And then, of course, balance type things. So different types of narrow stance and single leg work, where you're literally just working on static balance to hold yourself in place. So I've got 6 exercises that'll kind of wrap through those 3 main points that will hopefully help you.
You say lunges and
Squats.
Squats. I don't think I've ever been able to do a lunge or a squat.
Yeah. So,
Okay, and I got a black belt in my
Mhm.
40s.
can you sit on a toilet?
Yes.
You can squat. Yes, there's more fine tuning that potentially be done, but if you're sitting in a car, you're sitting on the couch, you're sitting at the table, you're sitting on the toilet, you're squatting.
However, I now, when I get up from the toilet, I put my hand,
Mhm.
I can't do it in a public place if it's, but I put my hand here and I use that
Yeah,
to get me up.
yeah,
And that means I know I have a third thing of balance.
Sure.
And I'm also using something to propel me.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It
Mhm.
feels like it propels me.
right. Well, I could go into in depth on hours, like a whole training session just onto a squat. But like another thing to think about, we could dive into. I won't necessarily dive into it on the exercise I'm about to show you, but to think about with squats or any movement that people often forget about is engaging your core. And what people usually think of as your core is like your 6-pack, everything we try to show off when we were way younger in bikinis on the beach on spring break. But there's actually like tons of muscles that revolve in your core, and your core is actually technically from your shoulders to your hips. So it's kind of everything in between that stabilizes your spine and allows power and force to be transmitted from your lower limbs to your upper limbs, so to speak, so we can work as one unit. So 3 main quick cues that I would give you without diving into like a full-on hour session would be when you are moving, especially if you're trying to get up or you're lifting anything heavy or putting anything heavy above your head. There's 3 main core cues to think about, like tightening up or engaging. Number 1 are your glutes, which are your big butt muscles. So this will stick with your mind. I always give this cue, but think about having a $100 bill between your cheeks and you have to hold on to it. If I can pull it out, you're not squeezing hard enough. That's a graphic cue, but it'll get you to remember it. So think about engaging your glutes when you're about to move or lift any type of load that's really heavy. The second one is your abs. There's a bunch of different abdominal muscles in there. Your rectus abdominis, which are your 6-pack muscles, but you also have 2 sets of obliques that run kind of diagonally, and you have a transverse abdominis that runs horizontally. But the basic way that you would want to think about engaging those is if I were to like throw a punch at you, you would kind of like tighten up and brace, right? So that's kind of the tension you want. It's almost a little bit of a downward crunch where your rib cage comes closer to your pelvis.
And we used to do that.
Right? Yeah.
You could take, I used to be able to take a punch
Yeah.
in the belly.
So that's the second one, is thinking about like, all right, tightening up my abs as if I'm about to get punched, squeezing my glutes as if I'm holding onto a $100 bill between my cheeks there. And then the third one is your pelvic floor, and that's the hardest one. It's one I can't actually show you, and I'll be a little bit graphic with this to get it across. For women, it's Kegels. So if you've had kids, you know what that is. For guys, so they tell me it's drawing up the boys. So that kind of tension at the bottom there, what that does is it provides support at the bottom of your pelvis, which is actually where your spine connects to. So you've got support at the pelvis, you've got support around the rib cage with the abdominal engagement, and then you've got support of your glutes, which are huge muscles, primary movers, especially if you're doing any type of like sit to stand or walking movement to get you up.
So if I were to draw a few lines, I'm going to do it diagonally, like you were looking at me from the side. You would see a line here, a line there, and a line there coming into this strong base, and it's almost like a V or
exactly,
or 2 parallels, but it's slightly a U.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you get that engagement, and also like when you're sitting, you engage, so abs, glutes, pelvic floor, you're talking about using your hand, but if you have those engaged and do a little bit of a momentum hinge from the hips, that might actually help you get up a little bit easier without using your hands. Now, there's nothing wrong with using your hands to support you. Obviously, that's safe. It provides another stability point. But it's the fact, can you do it without it? Because if you're finding that you can't, that's a sign that you are losing some aspects of strength or power. And we want to try to maintain that as long as possible for our own safety, right?
Yeah. There's a mental twist I'm thinking about now is I'm learning this is an adaptive thing, and if I adapt, that's one thing, but if it's an excuse not to keep that strong, that's the gray side of the.
Yeah, so it's totally cool to like use that hand to help you get up. Nothing wrong with it, but you don't want to use it as at the expense of like not ever engaging here, and then like the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
And ideally, you want to be able to maintain as much of that as possible. That's what's going to allow you to stay mobile and vital, till the end of time for everybody. So
Cool.
yeah, ready to get moving?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so sitting and standing is something we do all day long, right? We're getting out of bed, we're getting on the couch, we're getting in the car, we're getting on the toilet. So it's something we need to be able to do well, number one, but it's also important to be able to do it somewhat fast once we are able to do it in a slow and controlled manner. So, like I just said, we want to engage our 3 core cues when doing this. So abs, as if you're about to be punched, glutes like you're holding onto a $100 bill, and pelvic floor, your Kegel or pulling up the boys. And so from that, you're probably going to want a hip to shoulder width stance, maybe a little bit wider for this. When you get even better at it, you can go to those narrower stances that we discussed. But initially, starting out with what we call base stance, just whatever your natural stance is, hip to shoulder width. So you want to ideally be able to sit down and stand up through a full range without using your hands. If you need to use your hands ideally, that's totally fine. It's obviously safe to use your hands. You can put it in between your legs. You can put it on the outside of your legs. But what you want to try to avoid is you want to try to not put them on your knees, because what then you end up doing is pushing into your kneecap. And as we age, kneecaps start to move around a little bit more. And we just don't want to cause any more problems with our knees than might already be happening.
What if you put it on our thighs?
Thighs is okay. Just make sure it's up on the quads and not pushing into the knees. That's also okay. So ideally, we want to be able to sit and stand. Get comfortable with that at whatever pace feels safe to you. And once you are feeling safe, you want to try to increase that speed. It may be just a little bit more within that session, and then over the course of weeks you get faster. Or it may even be within that session you start to feel comfortable after 5 to 10, and so you can start to sit and stand faster within that session. But you want to be able to do those fast because we want to train the muscles to react fast. Again, like I mentioned earlier, in that tripping sensation, we've got to be able to get the foot out in front of us before we end up tumbling to the ground. So sitting and standing fast helps train those muscles for power and to react quickly. And then a second level of getting both speed into it, incorporating our environmental awareness or proprioceptive awareness, is going sit to stand. It's what I say sprint, but sprint is relative, so moving as fast as you can forward to backpedaling backwards. And backpedaling you might initially want to do slowly, especially if you have any spatial awareness issues that you know of. But this will help train all these systems we've been talking about. So as quickly as possible, you'll sit, you'll stand, you'll walk forward. Again, if you need to, look over your shoulder, walk backwards, and then sit, stand, repeat forwards and backwards. Sound cool?
Sounds cool, but it also sounds like it takes dedication and practice.
Yep. So definitely something you want to start slow and get comfortable with. Get the sit to stand down first before you add in the sprint to backpedal. And especially on the back pedal, you might be able to even move fast forward. Take a second here to regroup, especially if you have any of that dizziness that comes from moving your head, and look over your shoulder. Do the back pedal slowly. That in itself is a proprioceptive training right there. It's moving backwards because we're so used to moving forwards. So there's a bunch of moving parts here. But that one especially encounters everything we're talking about: balance, proprioceptive, vestibular, power. And so that one, if you can only do one of these, is actually one of the best ones to do. So any more questions on that one?
It just sounds like I'm talking to a professional.
Maybe we'll get you in here. You want to try it?
Okay.
Yeah. And I can be here. It's also helpful to have someone to help you out the first time, so actually I'm going to have you start standing. That way you can grab my hands if you need to at any point if you feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
So first thing, let's just practice the sit to stand. So sit down, abs engaged, glutes engaged. Good. This knee's a little bugging you there.
Yeah.
Good. Engage your abs, engage your glutes and pelvic floor. And I want you to rock into it a little bit and see if you can stand up without that hand. There you go. Good. Back down again. Nice and slow and controlled. Engage the 3 core cues, hinge into it. There you go. How's that feeling? You're not using the hand to help?
No, I little lower.
They are.
They're a little
They
lower,
are.
and that's what we notice is when
Yes.
it's lower.
So lower is definitely harder. That's one way to progress this. Most people don't have big long bathrooms to do something like this, but you could theoretically practice this on the toilet,
I've
right?
got 2 stools that are 2 different heights.
Yep, and you can practice those so they don't have bats.
Yes.
So be careful with that as well. But one way to progress this is to progress to a lower and lower stool as well. There are different ways to progress it, but for sure, toilets are usually one of the hardest. Getting in cars as well is typically
Yes.
challenging for a lot of people.
Yes.
So let's try, go ahead and stand up again. Perfect. So we're gonna go sit, stand. You're gonna walk forward as fast as you can. Pause when you get to the end of your walk. You can choose which side you wanna look over, and then we'll practice the back pedal. And I'll be right behind you just in case. All right. So 3 core cues, slow and control down. Engage them again, hinge up, good. As fast as you can forward, good. Pause. Look over one shoulder. There you go. Good. And then repeat. Let's do it one more time. Sit, stand, forwards. Good. Awesome. I'm right behind you. You're good. Come towards me a little bit more. Good. And relax. Awesome. See? You're pretty good at it. Better than you thought, I think. Awesome. Well, I've got 2 more for you that I want to show you.
Okay.
One of them is lunges. The reason lunges are great, they're great for your legs just like squats or sit-to-stands. Squats and sit-to-stands are almost the exact same thing. A squat is just unsupported, but you do have to squat to get into a chair, which is a sit. But with a lunge, it works similar muscle groups, but one leg more than the other at a time. So if you have any imbalances left to right, it's really great to work on lunges. The other thing is it requires a little bit more balance and stability because it's a narrower stance than a squat. So a
I
squat's
never wanted to learn
typically
lunges.
right here. Yeah, no one ever does. They burn a little bit more in the quads and the glutes than squats do too. So like when you're training them, it just feels a little bit more uncomfortable in the muscle and potentially in the joint if you have any issues there. But they are really important, especially if you think about a walk is really like a, so to speak, level 1 or level 0 lunge, right? It's a stride. A lunge is a stride and then lowering down. So this is like the top of your lunge. So if you can strengthen through more range of motion, then overall you're going to be able to better support yourself and prevent falls. So the easiest way to start with a lunge is going to be a step back lunge. A lot of people think stepping forward is easy.
You want to stand forward?
Yeah, I'm gonna show it
Okay.
from this view in a second. But a lot of people think if I'm going to start out with lunging, that I should step forward and lunge because like walking we always move forward. But a level 1 lunge, you actually want to step backwards because that's how you end up powering yourself out is forward. And I'll explain that. So if I step forward initially, when I power myself out of that lunge, I'm powering backwards, which is not how we typically move. It's still good to train, but for a level 1 perspective, we actually want to step backwards because the power phase is forwards. So level 1, I'm going to show full range of motion, but you don't have to do full range of motion. Hold on to something, opposite foot, steps back behind you. Ideal is knee to the ground, that's full range of motion. You can't get there, no problem, start where you're at. Hold on to the counter here, or whatever you got, back of a chair, cane, whatever you need for support, and go as low as you can. Maybe it's just a step back and then a little bit of a lower, and then you power forward. The thing with a lunge that you want to remember though, is to come up, to power yourself up, 80% of the work, 80+% of the work, should come from the front leg. So if you're coming back here in that lunge and you're pushing all kinds through that back toe, you're likely gonna feel potentially some knee pain in that back leg. So you want most of the push to come from the front part. It's just a little toe off push from the back leg. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Whether my muscles will cooperate is another thing.
That's true.
Because I've probably been using those compensating things for quite a while.
And now that you're aware of these 3 core cues, you actually might notice a difference. If you're able to engage those, you might be able to take a little less off the back. If you start to feel comfortable without using this, you can initially come off there and just work on step backs with this here in case you need to grab it. And then like a final progression would be taking them into actually walking forward in that lunge.
How far? What if I only go this far?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that
You're talking about depth-wise?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because at the moment, I can't perceive, I don't think I ever could have done that.
I bet I could get you there if I worked with you for a couple months.
We might talk about that.
Yeah. No, so like definitely start where you're at. So that's why I was saying like I'm going to show full range because that's the full expression of the movement. But if you're here, start there. And then every couple times you do it, see if you can just go another centimeter lower and build towards that. One thing to think about though when you are taking that step is you do want that to be a step, and as immediately as your foot makes contact, you want to lower down, wherever that may be. What you don't want what you don't want to happen is to step, and as you lower, your body continues to translate forward, and then you're in your toe as opposed to the whole foot down, and that's going to put a lot of stress on the muscles here and in your knee.
Okay, and so this is my mind talk.
Mm-hmm.
I've had knee issues my whole life. Actually, I remember my first fall on the ice skating rink.
Right on the kneecap?
This knee, got water in the knee, and then so this is going to be tricky. But if I can do some, it's a lot better than nothing.
Absolutely. You want to definitely start where you're at, and some is always better than nothing, for sure. All right, so this one's going to be trust falls, and this one, along with the sit to stand to sprint to back pedal, is probably the second most important one. Because what this one has to do with is really getting that foot out in front of you when you don't have your center of gravity over your base of support. So what I'm going to do, this is ideal with a partner, so I'll show the ideal setting first, and then I'll show if you want to practice by yourself. It doesn't work as well, but it's still something you can do if you don't have someone to practice with. So the first one is the partner, the person helping, is going to have a wall behind them. They're going to put their hips against the wall. That way, if for some reason this doesn't go as planned, you're supported as well, so you don't end up getting hurt too if she doesn't catch herself while you fall and you have to fully catch her weight. That's never happened to me in all the clients I've coached, but you always want to do safety first. So hips against the wall, your arms are out straight, and your core cues as a helper are engaged as well. So glutes, abs, and pelvic floor. I'm going to reach out and put my hands on her shoulders, and from there, she's going to lean forward from the ankles only, keeping her core cues engaged. She's not going to break at the hips at all. So right now, all her body weight is in my hands. If I were to let her go, she would potentially fall if she didn't get her foot out in front of her. So from here, level one is I'm going to give her a 3, 2, 1 countdown and tell her to step forward and catch herself with her right foot once I let go on that one. So we'll try it here, all right? So 3, 2, 1, right. We were anticipating a little bit there, yeah. So ideally you want to try not to anticipate, so 3, 2, 1, I'm going to let go on the one, and then you want to step as opposed to stepping before. That's very common though. Good. 3, 2, 1.
That's how you let go before one.
Alright. Let's try the left foot this time. 3, 2, 1. Good. Let's do one more. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. So all her weight is into my hands. She's only moving from the ankle. She's staying in line from heels to head, and all her body weight is in my hands with her core engaged. And then as soon as I let go, she's catching herself, either with the right foot or the left, whatever I told her. The advance to that, which I won't do with her today because she doesn't know me that well, probably doesn't trust me that much, but is to do that without a 3, 2, 1. So she's leaning into you, and you just hold for different amounts of time, and then let go, ready to catch her, and she either has the right foot out or the left foot out to catch. And that's more real life of as if you were to trip over something, you don't know where you're going to trip over, and you got to get one foot or the other out in front. That makes sense? Your heart going now?
I'm both a little intimidated and quite a bit encouraged and excited.
Awesome. Let me just show you one more version of that. It's not as ideal as having a partner, but if you're at home alone and you want to practice, another way is have yourself just a little bit more than arm width from there, so a little bit of a step, and you would just lean your body forward as if you were to do it with a partner. And then as soon as you feel yourself outside of your base of support, you step forward. You have the hands there just in case, and you catch yourself there. So not as great because you kind of know when it's happening. You can't get as much of a lean, and you tend to step earlier, but it's something you could still do on your own. Just make sure to get your hands out in front there so you potentially don't hit yourself in the face. Okay, so those 6 should get you a good start. And if you have to prioritize for time, I would say the 2 most important ones are sit to stand to sprint to back pedal, and then the trust falls.